What happens when Hollywood royalty sits down with daytime television's most controversial host? In just 11 seconds, one comment about American values would trigger the most shocking meltdown in talk show history, exposing Joy Behar's true colors and turning a simple interview into a career-defining moment that no one saw coming. Kevin Costner walked onto The View set that Tuesday morning, expecting nothing more than a friendly chat about his latest Western series. The studio audience erupted in applause as the beloved actor, wearing a simple navy blazer and that familiar warm smile, took his seat at the curved table surrounded by the 5 hosts of daytime television's most-watched talk show. Whoopi Goldberg, sitting center stage in her role as moderator, beamed at their guest. "Kevin Costner, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today." "Always a pleasure, Whoopi," Costner replied, his voice carrying that distinctive calm confidence that had made him America's sweetheart for decades. "Thanks for having me." Sunny Hostin leaned forward with enthusiasm. "Kevin, we have to talk about your new series. The storytelling, the cinematography, it's absolutely breathtaking. What drew you to this particular Western story?" Costner's eyes lit up as he began sharing his passion project. "You know, Sonny, I've always been fascinated by the stories of ordinary people who built this country. The farmers, the ranchers, the families who left everything behind to chase the American dream. There's something so pure about that determination, that belief in something bigger than yourself." Sarah Haynes nodded approvingly. "The family dynamics in the show are so compelling. How do you balance showing the harsh realities of that time period while still honoring the spirit of those pioneers?" "That's exactly the challenge we wanted to tackle," Costner responded thoughtfully. "These weren't perfect people living in perfect times, but they had principles. They understood that freedom comes with responsibility, that building something meaningful requires sacrifice. I think we've lost some of that understanding today." The conversation flowed naturally, with the host asking about his preparation for the role, working with the ensemble cast, and his approach to directing Western dramas. Costner spoke passionately about the importance of authentic storytelling and preserving American history through entertainment. Alyssa Farah Griffin chimed in with genuine curiosity. "Kevin, you've made so many films that celebrate American ideals. Do you think storytelling has a responsibility to inspire people, especially during challenging times?" Costner paused thoughtfully, choosing his words carefully. "I absolutely do, Alyssa. I think we have a responsibility as storytellers to remind people what makes this country special. Not to ignore our problems or pretend we're perfect, but to celebrate the values that have always made America a beacon of hope for people around the world." The audience murmured their approval, and even the host seemed genuinely engaged. This was exactly the kind of thoughtful, inspiring conversation that made for great television. But Joy Behar had been unusually quiet, sitting at the far end of the table with her arms crossed, occasionally rolling her eyes at Costner's responses. The veteran comedian and political commentator had built her career on sharp wit and controversial takes, never shying away from confrontation when she disagreed with a guest's perspective. Whoopi, sensing the positive energy in the room, decided to open the floor wider. "Joy, did you have any questions for Kevin?" Joy straightened in her chair, and there was something in her expression that should have served as a warning to everyone in that studio. Her smile was thin, almost predatory, as she prepared to pounce. "Well, Kevin," Joy began, her voice dripping with barely concealed disdain, "that's all very nice and patriotic and everything. But don't you think this whole American values thing is just a dog whistle for people who want to go back to the good old days, when women knew their place and minorities had no rights?" The studio fell completely silent. The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly unprepared for Joy's aggressive pivot. Costner's expression remained calm, but there was a flash of something in his eyes, a recognition that this conversation had just taken a very different turn. "I'm not sure I understand your question, Joy," Costner replied evenly. "When I talk about American values, I'm talking about things like hard work, personal responsibility, treating people with respect regardless of their background. I'm not sure how that connects to what you're suggesting." Joy leaned forward aggressively, her voice rising. "Oh, please. We both know what traditional American values really means. It's code for white, male, Christian dominance. Your movies are basically propaganda for a time, when people like me had to stay quiet and smile while men made all the decisions." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether they were witnessing good television or a complete disaster unfolding in real time. Costner took a deep breath, his famous composure still intact despite Joy's inflammatory accusations. "Joy, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm trying to say. When I make films about the American frontier or talk about values, I'm celebrating the idea that anyone, regardless of where they come from, can build a better life through hard work and determination. That's not exclusionary, that's inspirational. But Joy was just getting started. Her voice grew louder and more aggressive with each word. Inspirational? Kevin, your entire career has been built on romanticizing a period when women were property and Native Americans were being slaughtered. How is that inspirational to anyone except white men who missed the days when they could do whatever they wanted? The other hosts looked absolutely mortified. Whoopi tried to regain control of the situation. Joy, I think maybe we should let Kevin respond to your concerns without— No, Whoopi, Joy snapped, cutting off the moderator with shocking rudeness. I'm tired of sitting here pretending that these Hollywood cowboys are doing anything other than selling nostalgia for oppression. Kevin, do you even realize how offensive it is to sit here and lecture us about American values when your movies completely ignore the suffering your precious pioneers caused? Costner's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady and respectful. Joy, I've actually made several films that specifically address the mistreatment of Native Americans. Dances with Wolves won Best Picture partly because it showed the humanity and dignity of indigenous people. I've always tried to tell complete stories, not just comfortable ones. Oh, so you made one movie where you played a white savior and now you think you're absolved? Joy shot back, her voice reaching a pitch that made several audience members visibly cringe. That's even worse. You profited off pretending to care about Native Americans while still pushing this myth that America was built by noble pioneers instead of stolen through genocide. Sarah Haynes looked deeply uncomfortable and tried to intervene. Joy, I think Kevin is trying to explain that his work actually does address these complex historical issues. Sarah, please, Joy interrupted harshly, not even looking at her colleague. Don't defend this propaganda. Kevin, I want a straight answer. Do you or do you not think that your movies contribute to a false narrative about American history that makes white people feel better about their ancestors' crimes? The studio audience was now completely silent, shocked by Joy's relentless attack on their beloved guest. Costner remained remarkably composed, but there was steel in his voice as he responded. Joy, I think you're determined to see malice where none exists. My films aren't propaganda. They're stories about human beings trying to survive and build something meaningful in difficult circumstances. If you can't see the difference between celebrating resilience and endorsing historical injustices, then I don't think we're going to find common ground here. Joy's face flushed red with anger. Don't you dare talk down to me. I've been calling out Hollywood's lies for decades, while you've been making millions selling fairy tales to people who don't want to face reality. You sit there in your expensive blazer, lecturing us about values while completely ignoring the fact that your entire career is built on whitewashing history. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried desperately to redirect the conversation. Kevin, maybe you could talk about how you approach researching the historical accuracy of your projects. Alyssa, stop trying to help him. Joy exploded, her voice echoing throughout the studio. This is exactly the problem. Everyone's so eager to give these Hollywood elites a pass when they should be held accountable for the damage their movies do. Kevin, your films make people think the Old West was some noble adventure instead of a brutal campaign of conquest and exploitation. Costner's patience was clearly wearing thin, but he maintained his dignity. Joy, you seem to have made up your mind about my intentions regardless of anything I might say. I came here to talk about storytelling and the importance of preserving history, not to be lectured about crimes I never committed by someone who apparently hasn't actually watched my films. The audience gasped audibly at this subtle but pointed response. Joy's eyes flashed with fury, and her voice became almost shrill. Haven't watched your films? I've sat through every piece of revisionist garbage you've ever made. Field of Dreams, where you turn baseball into some mystical American religion. The Postman, where you literally play a savior, rebuilding civilization. Even your precious Dances with Wolves is just white guilt dressed up as enlightenment. You're not an artist, Kevin. You're a propagandist. Sunny Hostin looked absolutely horrified by her colleague's behavior. Joy, I think maybe we should take a breath here and— No, Sunny, Joy screamed, completely losing control now. I'm not taking a breath. I'm tired of watching this network platform. People who sell dangerous nostalgia to Americans who already can't face the truth about their history. Kevin Costner represents everything wrong with Hollywood's approach to American mythology, and I'm not going to sit here and smile while he spreads his poison. The other four hosts sat in stunned silence, clearly mortified by Joy's unhinged outburst. Costner looked around the table, his expression a mixture of sadness and disgust. Joy, I came here as a guest on your show to have a respectful conversation. You've turned this into a personal attack based on assumptions about my character and my work that simply aren't true. I don't think there's any point in continuing this discussion if you're not interested in actually listening to what I have to say." Joy leaned forward aggressively, pointing her finger directly at Costner. "You don't get to play victim here, Kevin. You've had decades to use your platform responsibly, and instead you've chosen to feed America's addiction to comfortable lies about its past. If you can't handle being challenged on that, then maybe you shouldn't be making movies about American history." The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by Joy's heavy breathing as she glared across the table at their guest. Whoopi finally found her voice, clearly desperate to salvage what was left of the interview. "Joy, I think we need to remember that Kevin is our guest here, and we should treat him with respect even when we disagree with his perspective." But Joy was beyond reason now, her face twisted with rage as she turned on her own colleague. "Respect? Whoopi, how can you sit there and talk about respect when this man has spent his entire career disrespecting every marginalized group in America? You of all people should understand how harmful these sanitized stories about American history really are." Costner stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. The entire studio watched in stunned silence as America's beloved actor prepared to make a decision that would define this moment forever. "You know what, Joy?" Costner said, his voice quiet but filled with unmistakable authority. "I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I've never walked off a set or left an interview. But I'm not going to sit here and let you attack my character, my work, and my intentions when you clearly have no interest in having an honest conversation." Joy shot up from her chair, her voice reaching a fever pitch. "Oh, you're going to run away now? How typical. When someone finally calls you out on your garbage, you can't handle the heat. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You Hollywood elites think you can just walk away when someone challenges your comfortable worldview." The other host looked mortified. Sarah Haynes put her hand to her mouth in shock, while Sunny Hostin shook her head in disbelief. Alyssa Farah Griffin stared at Joy with undisguised horror, clearly unable to believe what she was witnessing. Costner turned to face Joy directly, and for the first time in the entire interview, there was real fire in his eyes. "Joy, I've listened to you attack my movies, my character, and my motivations for the past 10 minutes. You've accused me of being a racist, a propagandist, and a fraud. You've done this without asking a single genuine question or showing the slightest interest in understanding my actual perspective. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just cruelty." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Joy's face was red with fury, but Costner wasn't finished. "You want to talk about American values? How about basic human decency? How about treating a guest with respect? How about having the intellectual honesty to engage with someone's actual arguments instead of tearing down straw men that exist only in your head?" Joy was practically vibrating with rage. "Don't you lecture me about decency. You've made millions selling lies to people who want to feel good about genocide and slavery. Your movies are literally propaganda that makes Americans think their history is something to be proud of instead of something to be ashamed of." Costner shook his head sadly. "Joy, the fact that you think Americans should be ashamed of their entire history tells me everything I need to know about your worldview. This country isn't perfect, and I've never claimed it was. But it's also given more people more opportunities for freedom and prosperity than any nation in human history. If you can't see anything worth celebrating in that story, then I genuinely feel sorry for you." Joy exploded. "Feel sorry for me? Feel sorry for me? I feel sorry for every person who's ever been hurt by the mythology you peddle. I feel sorry for every Native American who has to watch your movies pretend their ancestors weren't murdered. I feel sorry for every woman who has to see the Old West romanticized when it was a nightmare for anyone who wasn't a white man." Whoopi stood up, clearly trying to regain control. "Joy, please, let's just take a step back here." But Joy whirled around to face Whoopi with shocking venom. "No, I'm not stepping back. Someone needs to hold these people accountable. Kevin Costner has poisoned American minds for decades with his feel-good fantasies about murderers and thieves, and I'm not going to pretend that's okay just because he's famous." Costner looked around the table at the other hosts, all of whom appeared deeply embarrassed by their colleagues' behavior. "Ladies, I want to thank you for having me on the show. Whoopi, Sarah, Sunny, Alyssa, you've been gracious hosts. I'm sorry this didn't work out better." He started to walk toward the edge of the set, but Joy wasn't done. She followed him, her voice becoming even more shrill and desperate. "That's right. Run away. Run back to your mansion and your Hollywood bubble where everyone tells you how wonderful you are. But don't think for one second that this is over. I'm going to make sure people know exactly what kind of person you really are." Costner stopped and turned back one final time, his voice calm but unmistakably final. "Joy, you've shown everyone exactly what kind of person you are. I don't think you need my help with that." The studio erupted. Some audience members applauded Costner's dignified exit, while others sat in stunned silence. The other hosts remained frozen at the table, clearly processing the professional disaster they had just witnessed. But Joy wasn't finished. As Costner disappeared behind the cameras, she turned back to face the audience, her chest heaving with emotion. "Good riddance," she shouted. "We don't need Hollywood propagandists on this show anyway. If Kevin Costner can't handle being challenged on his dangerous mythology, then he has no business making movies about American history." Whoopi finally found her voice, speaking directly to the cameras with visible embarrassment. "We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll try to have a more productive conversation about entertainment and history." As the show cut to commercials, Joy remained standing, still breathing heavily, seemingly unaware that she had just committed professional suicide on live television. The other hosts avoided eye contact with her, while the studio audience buzzed with shocked whispers about what they had just witnessed. In less than 20 minutes, Joy Behar had transformed what should have been a pleasant promotional interview into the most shocking meltdown in daytime television history, exposing her own intolerance and cruelty while making Kevin Costner look like the most reasonable person in America. The 11 seconds it took for her to launch her first attack had set in motion a chain reaction that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come, cementing her legacy as the host who couldn't control herself when faced with someone who dared to express pride in American values.